Let's cut to the chase now with the Population and Cities Minister Alan Tudge, who joins us live from Sydney, it looks like there. Alan, thanks for joining us. You're obviously in Sydney for this announcement today. Tell us first up about that. We know about the second Sydney airport and plans to get that underway. It's some way off, but you're bringing forward a metro line to get out there, and you're chucking in $1.5 billion with the state government.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. So, well, the Western Sydney Airport is well and truly under construction, and if you go out there, it's a real sight to be seen because the landscape is literally changing before your eyes. And today what we did was announce that we're going to get on with the $11 billion new train line to connect up the Sydney Metro from St Mary's to the airport. It's about 23 kilometres in total that will be. Construction is going to begin later this year and be completed by the time that the airport is open in 2026. And probably most importantly, particularly at the moment, Chris, is that this project alone will generate 14,000 jobs, all sorts of jobs, tradies jobs, crane operators, forklift operators, truck drivers, you name it. And those jobs, of course, are desperately needed and they're going to kick off soon.
The question here, though, is this new money? Is this a new commitment or effectively a commitment that the federal government was going to put into this project and you've just brought it forward?
No, it's a commitment we've had for some time. In fact, when we announced the Western Sydney Airport, we said when it opens, we commit to having a train line and a freeway to the airport from day one, rather than trying to retrofit it subsequently like we tend to do. Now, initially our commitment was $7 billion. We've now added an extra $3.5 billion or so between the two levels of government, and that's what was announced today, and bringing forward the construction timetable to being beginning later this year.
So this is all about stimulus money. This is all about trying to bring forward infrastructure spend and try and create jobs on the other side of the coronavirus pandemic. Does this mean all efforts at fiscal rectitude are now abandoned? I mean, this is good economic, productive infrastructure, of course, but you obviously didn't think you could afford to do it this quickly a year ago. You're bringing it forward now because you believe we're going to be so desperate on the other side of the pandemic.
Well, we always committed, Chris, to have this train line completed by the time the airport would be open in 2026. So we were getting pretty close to that deadline in any case. If we didn't get started shortly, we may well miss that 2026 deadline. So, yes, we have added more money to the project to get it going. In part, it's more money because we've got an extra 5.8 kilometres worth of tunnelling, which, of course, is more expensive but also better for local residents, better amenity there. But we really want to get this project going because of this jobs impact. Now, Western Sydney, if you haven't been out there recently, it really is being transformed, and we've got massive investments out there through this rail line, through the $5.3 billion airport, through freeway builds, other builds, universities going out there. It really is transforming the landscape in Western Sydney between our two levels of government in partnership with the university sector, business, Aboriginal leaders and the like. And it really is, as I said, a sight to behold.
Now, I think governments, Labor or Liberal, state or federal, get a big tick when they invest in this sort of economic infrastructure, transport infrastructure. But there's other stimulus being talked about now. We read today about the federal government looking at grants for home renovations. Is this going ahead? When can we know more about that?
Yeah, so that was flagged today that we are looking at seeing if we can stimulate the residential construction sector. Now, the construction sector as a whole, Chris, is about 1.3 million jobs. It's a massive part of the economy. The civil construction side, which we've just been talking about, largely publicly funded, is still going quite well, and we're trying to boost that even further. But the residential construction and the commercial construction side has been faltering, and we've been concerned that it could really slow down, and including because migration has effectively come to a standstill. So we are looking at what we can do to support this area, and the details are being worked out at the moment, so we haven't got the details to announce, but we are flagging that we are looking into this.
But when you talk about home ownership and the housing market in this country, the problem is getting people into it, surely. Those people who already have a house and a mortgage are doing well because of what has happened to property values over time, and they have access to very cheap money now if they do want to invest in their own property by upgrading it. Why on earth should governments be helping people to renovate when surely a better spend would be to help people get into their first home?
Well, I think the main focus will still be on trying to get new houses constructed. That obviously produces more jobs and has that outcome that you're referring to. I think it was flagged that we're looking more broadly across the entire sector to see what we can do to really hold up that industry. And so we're not being closed-minded here.
Yeah, it's good of you to bring it in just a day or two after I signed up for my renovations. Missed out on that one. Now, you, of course...
sorry, Chris. I'm sorry about that, mate.
Now, I'm interested in immigration because of the pandemic, we've had a forced halt to immigration in this country. A lot of people will applaud that. A lot of people are saying we should have been doing that. But there's a big hit to the economy. It's been costed today at $40 billion. Do you think we need to ramp up immigration as soon as we can on the other side of the pandemic, obviously with the proper quarantining and safety checks in place? Or are we destined now to have sharply lower levels of immigration for a long while to come?
Chris, it's a bit too early to say because until really we have a global vaccine, it's hard to foresee us having the same levels of immigration that we've had previously, because you've got to remember that a lot of our movements across the border are for short-term purposes, be it for tourism, which you might be, say, 10 million movements across the border each year, short-term business people coming in, and others who stay here for maybe a year and then return. So until you have that global vaccine, we're not going to have a lot of that temporary migration. In terms of what the program looks like in 2, 3, 4 years' time, if there's still high unemployment, inevitably it will be lower as well, because a lot of our migration program is demand-driven also. And what I mean by that is that you can, for example, sponsor a person into the country if you are unable to find an Australian to do the job. If unemployment's high, the chances are you're going to be much more likely to find an Australian to do the job. Consequently, that element of the migration program would be down in any case. So I guess that's a long answer to your question, being that it's likely to be a lot smaller in any case, Chris.
Yeah, I suppose let's just stay on that, because there's a lot of debate about immigration before the pandemic. As we've been discussing, there's a temporary halt effectively brought about by the pandemic. Would it be fair to say that the government, during this halt in immigration, is having a major rethink about our immigration program and what shape it should be when we come out the other side?
We're certainly thinking about what shape it should be and how you might progressively open the borders and what your priorities are. Absolutely. I think people would probably criticise if they didn't think that we were thinking through this, but it is too early to say exactly what it's going to look like. We'll obviously have some more to say about it in the budget, because it's typically in the budget context that we outline at least what the next 12 months is going to look like and what the permanent migration program will look like. And we're working through those things now.
Now, the states are starting to open up after the pandemic lockdowns. Even your state, the People's Republic of Victoria, is starting to open up.
Finally, Chris, finally.
You can get a beer in Melbourne today. Have the states, on the whole, been too slow to open up? Do they need to quicken the pace? Because rather than throwing around billions of dollars in infrastructure spending, the best way to get the economy going again is to remove all the restrictions as quickly as we can, as safely as we can.
Well, I think that's right. Those two things need to be brought together. It needs to be as quickly as possible, but done safely as well. And certainly, I mean, here in New South Wales, and New South Wales feels a lot more open than Victoria does at the moment, my home state. And today I think they're going to having 50 people in each of the bars and restaurants, for example, which really starts to make it much more economic for those places to be able to open and employ staff. Now, that's particularly important. Just like the construction industry is a massive employer, so is the restaurants and bars and entertainment sector as well. And so we've really got to get those jobs back, particularly because they employ so many young people, and we really want to see young people working again.
And just finally, Alan Tudge, another finally, if I said finally at the last question, that is, we talked about international borders, of course. Yeah. What about those state borders? Surely it's time for all of the states and territories to open up their borders? Well,
there's no health advice that we are getting which says that the borders should be closed. So that's our position.
So why are they doing it?
But particularly for, well, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask the state premiers that, but particularly think that a state like Queensland, frankly, would be missing out because so many of the Victorians and New South Welshmen actually travel up to Queensland over these winter months and go to places which desperately need the business and the investments, places like Cairns or Townsville, those warmer places. So I think it's actually in their interest to open the borders sooner rather than later, but ultimately that's their call, not the federal government's.
Thanks for joining us, Alan.